Saturn 1. All right. Question 3. Let's see what that looks like. On June 2nd, 1966, this spacecraft became
I have to survey my answers.
Surveyor! Surveyor! Thousand high-quality photographs of the surface of the moon.
Yeah.
Wow.
As it went in for
And
landing.
these survey cameras, you know, these are video cameras and film.
Oh, yeah,
and so you talk about how many photos?
10 astronaut became the first person to walk on the moon.
Armstrong.
That is Neil Armstrong, exactly. Very good. So well done.
Your NASA meatball.
Surprise. So if you're just joining us, we're talking about robot.
Yes. So it all started with robots. Actually, I think Tony's more.
Started back in the late 1950s when a little.
Next.
That's 92.6 minutes.
Yeah.
That's the orbit around the Earth.
Effort between the United States and the Soviet Union to get to the humans to the moon first.
To leave the Earth safely, you then have to get to the moon, so you're able to go and get captured by the. There's a lot of different steps to when you're starting to explore.
Yeah, I mentioned some of those.
Gosh, we got out of the 50s, we got into the 60s, and what was next?
Off
Get
the
off the
Earth
Earth.
to the moon.
To the moon.
Yeah, and that was a challenge to make them not fully successful.
Yeah, one of them missed the moon, but
Ranger 7 launching.
This was the first fully successful Ranger mission. Ranger 6 launch, others, the fairings didn't work. That's the part that holds the spacecraft. To navigate to the moon, but also transmit data. So these are images of the moon as we go into Corten series, and it was key because without doing that, being able to get to the moon, you can't do the next
and
step
if you
by
go
step,
in orbit
yeah.
around the moon, then you've shown that you can slow down. You can look at something else.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I know one of your favorite images or
World of Earth from lunar orbit, and that was from Lunar Orbiter 1. You're seeing it right now.
Oh, yeah.
Perspective changing photograph, because this is us looking back at home from our nearest neighbor, the moon. Test the film on board the spacecraft and sent it back. And that's also technology of both the surface of the moon, but also looking back at the Earth.
so that when
across an image, take TV motion picture of the.
To take an interest in the history of NASA and look at this beautiful picture you're seeing right now. You know, with today's computer techniques and looking at images, you can remove artifacts. So, and some of our best images of the moon come from that period. I mean, you capture a lot of dynamic range.
So we orbited the moon,
Yeah.
and then
Next
After
step
that-
to the surface, and not in the way Ranger did. That was a hard landing, and sometimes a crash. Surveyor missions really were intended to understand how to land on the moon softly and in a controlled way. And they taught us with GPS, right? You pull up your map app
oh yeah,
and
you just plug in a phone.
Yeah.
Moon.
Exactly. They had to learn how to have the rockets not only slow you into orbit, but now slow as how deep was the lunar dust. We knew there was a dust that covered, if you will.
imagine that.
And so there was a real concern that
If you landed something on the moon,
you're going to sink. Spacecraft falls on its side, whatever. So
sending the robots, the robotic, you can land safely.
Wow. Yeah, I have a quick question from the chat. This is a fundamental moon question from Babu Kar. How old is the moon? As old as Earth?
yeah.
I mean, the origin of the moon is something that we're still trying to understand.
exactly.
I mean, there are, but the leading theory is that at some point during the early parts of our solar system, come our moon, and that's got a lot of observational evidence that we can support that. But we weren't there.
Theory is right. It's just a little bit younger than the Earth, but made largely.
Very much at a fundamental level.
And you talked about that surveyor mission, trying to figure out how fluffy or
What
not.
we're seeing is astronaut P. Conrad walking up the excursion module from Apollo 12. They pinpointed for, of course, testing where you can land strategically.
Okay, see if they could do it.
But now they're going up and that set the scale for the landscape, and then we followed it with the human because it shows that the robots help with the human exploration images.
Yeah, there's a lot in there.
So after these Apollo missions, so we got to walk on the moon.
And it was 1972, and then after that, nothing happened.
Nothing.
Nothing.
22
The United States returned to the
22
moon.
years, you said?
22 years.
22 years after the final defense
Not the fruit.
spacecraft.
Those
No.
are good though.
And
Not the oranges.
really important mission because it tested a theory that had been out and others that water could exist at the poles of the moon. Because the